Was Cuba ever a part of the United States?
The United States went to war against Spain in 1898 to assist Cubans who were rebelling against Spanish rule. The United States took control of Cuba during the Spanish-American War in 1898 and held it until 1902, when Cuba was granted independence. The three-year military occupation by the United States ended with an agreement that the United States would be allowed to lease Guantanamo Bay, which the United States still uses as a naval base.
Why did the international dateline recently move?
Prior to 1995, the country of Kiribati, consisting of 21 inhabited islands, straddled the international dateline, thus dividing the country into 2 days. In 1995, Kiribati decided to shift its portion of the international dateline far to the east so that the entire country could be on the same side of the dateline.
Are there still glaciers in the United States?
Yes, small glaciers exist throughout Alaska, within the Cascade Range of Washington state, sporadically across the Rocky Mountains, and also in the Sierra Nevadas of California.
Why don't Americans eat horse meat?
Most religions and cultural groups have some kinds of food taboos. Foods may be avoided entirely or may be avoided on certain days or during certain festivals. Religious food taboos include the avoidance of pork by Muslims and Jews and the avoidance of beef by Hindus. Cultural food taboos also play an important role. For example, Americans don't eat horse meat because it is a cultural food taboo, despite the fact that horse meat is a nutritional and edible type of food.
What was the Trail of Tears?
In 1838, the United States rounded up approximately 15,000 members of the Cherokee Nation and forced them from their homes in Tennessee to a reservation in Oklahoma. The removal of the Cherokee Nation from their land was done so that citizens of the United States could use the fertile lands in Tennessee. Along the trail, approximately 1/4 of the Cherokees died from malnutrition, disease, and government inefficiency.
What caused the Bhopal disaster?
In December 1984, the U.S. owned Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, leaked toxic chemicals, methyl isocyanate gas, that killed over 3,800 people. It was the worst industrial accident in history. Union Carbide paid a fine of $470 million to avoid facing criminal charges.
How did the Monroe Doctrine protect the Americas?
In 1823, President James Monroe gave a speech that declared the Americas off-limits to European powers. These policies became known in the 1840s as the Monroe Doctrine. Since 1823, the United States has used the Monroe Doctrine not only to prevent intervention by Europeans but also to further its own expansionist goals. How many countries has the U.S.?
How much of the ozone layer is being depleted?
Since 1975, scientists believe that more than 33% of the ozone layer has disappeared. There is a seasonal factor to the reduction in ozone at any given time during the year, too. At different times, the ozone layer naturally declines or rises. But scientists also know that chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, which are used for air conditioning, aerosol sprays, halon in fire extinguishers, and the interaction of man-made chemicals with nitrogen in our atmosphere, directly cause ozone depletion. It is a man-made problem that requires a man-made solution.
What are the 7 wonders of the modern world?
According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, the 7 wonders of the modern world include the Channel Tunnel between England and France, the CN Tower in Toronto, Canada, the Empire State Building, New York, the Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco, the Itaipu Dam between Brazil and Paraguay, the Netherlands North Sea Protection Works, and the Panama Canal.
What was Mesopotamia?
This ancient region lay between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. From contemporary southern Turkey to the Persian Gulf, Mesopotamia was the home, at one time or another, to such civilizations as Babylonia, Assyria, and Sumer.
What are the 7 natural wonders of the world?
These include the Aurora Borealis, Northern Lights, Mt. Everest, on the border of China and Nepal, Victoria Falls, in eastern Africa. The Grand Canyon, USA, Great Barrier Reef, Australia, Paracutin, volcano in Mexico, and the harbor of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with its stunning topography.
Who rules Andorra?
Since 1278, the tiny country of Andorra, nestled in the Pyrenees between France and Spain, has been jointly ruled by two people who live outside the country: the President of France and the Bishop of La Seu d'Urgell in northeastern Spain. France and Spain jointly take responsibility for the defense of Andorra.
Where has 1/3 of the population of Suriname emigrated to since 1975?
Suriname was a Dutch colony until it gained independence in 1975. Since 1975, approximately 200,000 of its residents have emigrated to the Netherlands.
What were some of the earliest colonies?
The Phoenicians, around the year 1000 B.C., founded some of the first colonies in Tyre, present-day Lebanon. Colonists from there went on to colonize Carthage, present-day Tunisia, and the coast of Spain. This enabled them to control access to the Atlantic Ocean and trade with the indigenous peoples of what is today Great Britain and France.
Who speaks Swahili?
While approximately 10 million people speak Swahili as a first language, and another 80 million East Africans speak it as a second language, it is not an indigenous language. Swahili is a mixture of Arabic and African languages that gradually developed through trading between Africans and Arabs. Though there are over 1,000 different languages in Africa, Swahili is the second most popular language, Arabic is the first.
What is the greenhouse effect?
The greenhouse effect is a natural process of the atmosphere that traps some of the sun's heat near the Earth. The problem with the greenhouse effect, however, is that it has been unnaturally increased, causing more heat to be trapped and the temperature on the planet to rise. The gases that have caused the greenhouse effect were added to the atmosphere as a byproduct of human activities, especially combustion from automobiles.
Is Australia the smallest continent?
Despite being the sixth largest country in the world, Australia is the smallest continent in the world. Australia is approximately 3 million square miles, 7.8 million square kilometers, in area, just a little smaller than Brazil.
War with Iraq?
Numbers and methods used to compute the statistics of dead and wounded in Iraq vary considerably. From a high of over 1.2 million people, Opinion Research Business, which is more than the Rwanda genocide, to a low of 654,000 people, Lancet Survey. As of 2008, over 4,000 Americans have lost their lives in Iraq since the war began. How much money have U.S.
Is Scotland a country?
While Scotland does have limited self-rule, it is still part of the country of the United Kingdom. Scotland occupies the northern portion of the island of Great Britain.
When was the first watch made?
In the early 16th century, German locksmith Peter Kenline began to produce portable clocks called Nuremberg eggs. Advances in later centuries led to timepieces that could be worn on the wrist.
What is the leading cause of death in the United States?
Approximately one-third of all Americans die from cardiovascular disease, making it the country's leading cause of death. Cancers are the second leading cause of death in America, killing over 1/4 of the population.
If I dug through the earth, would I end up in China?
If you are in North America and you were able to dig through the earth, which is impossible due to such things as pressure, the molten outer core, and solid inner core, you would end up in the Indian Ocean, far from land masses. If you were really lucky, you might end up on a tiny island. But you're surely not going to end up in China. The points at opposite sides of the Earth are called antipodes. Most antipodes of Europe fall into the Pacific Ocean.
Who invented geography?
The Greek philosopher Thales was one of the first to argue about the shape of the world in the 6th century B.C.E. and Chinese texts of the 5th century BCE describe the provinces of China in great detail. However, the Greek scholar Eratosthenes is credited with the first use of the word geography. In the 3rd century BCE, he is also known as the father of geography for his geographical writing and accomplishments, including the measurement of the circumference of the Earth.
Who's fighting over the Falkland Islands?
The Falkland Islands, also known as Islas Malvinas, located near the southern tip of South America, have long been a source of conflict between the United Kingdom and Argentina. Though the islands have been occupied by the British since 1833, Argentina has claimed the islands as its own since the 18th century. In 1982, Argentina invaded the islands, but the British regained possession within a matter of weeks. Argentina still claims the Islas Malvinas and is pursuing its acquisition through diplomatic channels.
Is the Strait of Magellan crooked?
Yes, it is. The Strait of Magellan is a winding waterway between South America and the islands of Tierra del Fuego at the southern tip of South America. This strait was discovered by the explorer Ferdinand Magellan in 1520 and has been used as a shortcut to avoid having to sail around Cape Horn, the southern tip of South America.
What is a tsunami?
A tsunami, also known as a seismic sea wave, is usually caused by an earthquake that occurs under the ocean or near the coast. The seismic energy creates a large wave that can cause heavy damage hundreds or even thousands of miles from its source. Hawaii is frequently struck by tsunamis.
What was the highest temperature ever recorded?
The world's highest temperature was recorded in the desert in Libya in 1922. The temperature was 136 degrees Fahrenheit. California's Death Valley holds the record for the highest temperature in the United States, 134 degrees in 1913.
Which explorer was named the Grand Imperial Eunuch by the Emperor of China?
The Chinese explorer Cheng Ho helped Emperor Yongle come to power in 1402. And in 1404 the emperor named Cheng Ho the Grand Imperial Eunuch. In 1405, Cheng Ho set sail on the first of his 7 voyages, which spread Chinese influence and knowledge throughout South Asia and Africa. China moved toward isolationism after Yongle died.
Why do some countries choose not to join the United Nations?
A country must be willing to give up some of its self-rule for the greater good, which often means the good of the larger, Western countries.
Which state has the longest coastline?
Alaska has more than 5,500 miles, 8,851 kilometers, of coastline. The next largest is actually Michigan, which has 3,288 miles, 5,291 kilometers, of coastline. Far longer than both Florida, 1,197 miles 1,926 kilometers, and California, 840 miles 1,352 kilometers.
Why is permafrost so important?
Aside from the mediating effects on the Earth's temperature, permafrost provides a cover for the habitat that supports wild flora and fauna, which provides sustenance for the entire ecosystem of the Arctic regions, including the many indigenous people who live there.
What is the only state with a diamond mine?
Arkansas is the only state with a diamond mine. Located in southwestern Arkansas, the mine is no longer in commercial production but is now a park. Crater of Diamonds State Park, that allows visitors to take any diamonds they find.
Who provides food to North Korea today?
The top exporters of food to North Korea are China, Japan, South Korea, and the United States.
Which country spends the most money on the military?
The United States leads the world in military spending. American taxpayers commit more than $580 billion per year for military activities. The next closest nation is France, which spends $74 billion.
What is the world's second longest barrier reef?
The second longest barrier reef in the world lies just off the Atlantic coast of Belize, on the northeastern corner of Central America, and consists of Lighthouse Reef and Glover's Reef. Belize's reefs are only a few dozen miles long, while the Great Barrier, the longest reef in the world, is hundreds.
Where is the Rock of Gibraltar?
The Rock of Gibraltar is a limestone mountain located on the Gibraltar Peninsula in southern Spain. The city of Gibraltar, located on this same peninsula, is actually a British colony, and is used as a naval air base. This is the perfect location from which to control the Strait of Gibraltar, the small waterway that connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Atlantic Ocean. Spain has continually advocated a claim for this area but has been consistently unable to retrieve this vital piece of land. On the opposite side of the Strait of Gibraltar, at the northern tip of Morocco, Spain has its own autonomous community, consisting of Ceuta and Melilla, which is also strategically located to control the Strait of Gibraltar.
How fast is the population growing?
The highest growth rate recorded was around 2% in the late 1950s. This rate has been in decline and is now less than 1% per year.
How do the Netherlands keep getting bigger?
For hundreds of years, the Dutch have been expanding the size of their country by building dikes and draining, and reclaiming, land. These lands, known as polders, have greatly expanded the size of the Netherlands and are now considered one of the 7 wonders of the modern world.
How did the Ukraine help feed the Soviet Union?
Often called the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. The Ukraine's rich wheat harvests were used to feed the USSR. Now, as an independent country, Ukraine produces 4% of the world's wheat and exports much of it to Russia.
Why is Christopher Columbus credited with discovering the New World?
Despite the fact that Christopher Columbus was not the first person nor the first European to reach the Americas, Columbus's discovery was important in that it prompted mass exploration and colonization of the New World. Though the idea of Columbus discovering the New World is extremely Eurocentric, Europeans have credited Columbus with the discovery of, and the enthusiasm surrounding the exploration of, the New World.
Which countries are members of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization?
The 26 members of NATO include Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Turkey, the United Kingdom, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, and the United States.
Where are the Low Countries?
Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg are known as the Low Countries because of their low elevation.
How fast do hurricane winds blow?
The strongest hurricanes have winds that reach speeds well over 150 miles, 240 kilometers, per hour.
What is an atoll?
In addition to reefs, coral can also form atolls. Atolls are formed when a volcano, around which coral often grows, erodes away, leaving a circular wall of coral with a lagoon at the center.
What are continents?
Continents are the 6 or 7 large land masses on the planet. If you count 7 continents, these include Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, North America, and South America. Some geographers refer to 6 continents by combining Europe and Asia as Eurasia, due to the fact that it is one large tectonic plate and land mass. So whether you count Europe and Asia one continent or two, divided at the Ural Mountains in western Russia, is up to the individual. Australia is the only continent that is its own country.
Which Middle Eastern country has the most tourism?
Turkey has the most tourist arrivals, with more than 20 million people coming to visit each year. Because of the annual Hajj, or pilgrimage, to Saudi Arabia's religious sites of Mecca and Medina. More than 9 million people visit there each year. Over 8 million people visit Egypt each year.
What is the North Magnetic Pole?
The North Magnetic Pole is where compass needles around the world point. It is located in Canada's Northwest Territories at about 71 degrees north, 96 degrees west. Latitude and longitude, about 900 miles, 1,450 kilometers, away from absolute North Pole. It moves continuously, so to determine true north, look at a recent topographic map for your local area. It should note the magnetic declination, which means the degrees east or west. That you'll need to rotate your compass to determine which way is actually north.
Which African country has Spanish as an official language?
Equatorial Guinea, which is composed of 5 islands in the Gulf of Guinea and a tiny sliver of land between Cameroon and Gabon, was a colony of Spain until 1968 and has kept Spanish as its official language. The capital city of Malabo is located on the island of Bioko, previously named Fernando Poo.
What is the European country most visited by tourists?
Over 76 million people visit France each year. Spain is the next most popular with 56 million visitors.
What is the Coriolis effect?
Due to the rotation of the Earth, any object on or near the Earth's surface will veer to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. This applies especially to phenomena such as ocean currents and wind. Imagine a missile being fired at New York by Los Angeles. As the missile flies over the United States, the Earth continues to rotate under the missile and it strikes New Jersey instead. Missile launchers and pilots need to factor the spinning of the Earth into their trajectories in order to end up in the right place. North of the equator, ocean currents and winds rotate clockwise. But south of the equator, the opposite is true.
What is the largest continent?
The largest continent is Eurasia, Europe and Asia combined. At 21,100,000 square miles, 54,649,000 square kilometers. But even if you consider Europe and Asia to be two separate continents, Asia is still the largest, at 17,300,000 square miles, 44,807,000 square kilometers.
What is the difference between a physical and a political map?
A physical map shows natural features of the land such as mountains, rivers, lakes, streams, and deserts. A political map shows human-made features and boundaries such as cities, highways, and countries. The maps we use in atlases and see on the walls of classrooms are typically a combination of the two.
How is hail formed?
Hail is ice that is formed in large thunderstorm clouds. Hail begins as droplets of water normally destined to become raindrops that are blown upward and subsequently freeze. They then fall lower within the cloud, where they collect more water, are blown upward again, and refreeze. The hailstone grows larger as it collects more and more ice, and eventually falls to the ground.
What is the difference between a highway and a freeway?
The term highway can be used for any road, but most often describes a paved road connecting distant towns. Freeways are multi-lane highways that use on- and off-ramps, rather than intersections. in order to limit the number of entrance and exit points along the route, hence keeping traffic along the freeway fairly steady.
How can a gazetteer help me find latitude and longitude?
A gazetteer is an index that lists the latitude and longitude of places within a specific region or across the entire world. Many atlases include a gazetteer, and some are published separately.
Why was the border between the Yemen and Saudi Arabia dashed on maps?
In the sandy desert between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, the border between the two countries was in dispute. A treaty signed in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in July of 2000 resolved the conflict. And maps no longer show a dashed line between the two countries.
What is pinyin?
Pinyin is a new system for transliterating Chinese into the Roman alphabet. It replaced the Waite-Giles system in 1958. When the Chinese government started using Pinyin for external press announcements, it has gradually gained acceptance, and is the reason why we now call the Chinese capital Beijing instead of Peking, a Waite-Giles transliteration.
What does an earthquake feel like?
Smaller earthquakes or tremors feel disorienting at first. You feel a sense that the room is spinning, as if you are becoming dizzy. Usually preceding an earthquake, when the initial tremors hit, you can hear the sounds of things rattling that you have never heard before, like glasses rubbing against each other and windows vibrating. With larger earthquakes, as the earth nearby tears or opens, you can hear a very loud rumbling sound that is similar to a train driving by.
What is a watershed?
A watershed is the boundary between drainage basins. It is usually the crest of a mountain where water flows on either side into two different drainage basins.
In which direction do ships sail through the Panama Canal?
Though you would expect them to travel east from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean when sailing through the Panama Canal, ships actually travel northwest, since the Isthmus of Panama lies parallel to the equator. The canal does not lie east-west but rather northwest-southeast.
How big is Siberia?
Siberia makes up approximately 3/4 of Russia. Siberia is bounded on the west by the Ural Mountains, on the north by the Arctic Ocean, on the east by the Pacific Ocean, and on the south by China, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan. Russia conquered the area now known as Siberia in the late 16th century.
Is global warming melting the North Pole?
Yes, from 1979 to 2005 the North Pole region lost 2.05 million square miles of total area. 5.31 square kilometers, which is equivalent to an area the size of California and Texas combined. These changes have not been seen since between 6,000 and 125,000 years ago.
How long did it take for the world population to double in size?
From 1959 to 1999, the population went from 3 billion to over 6 billion.
Where was the Pale of Settlement?
During the 18th and 19th centuries, the Pale of Settlement was an area in which Russia attempted to restrict Jewish settlement. It extended from what is now eastern Poland to Ukraine and Belarus. Within the confines of the Pale, Jews were subjected to anti-Jewish regulations as well as mass killings.
Which country has the most Azeri-speaking people?
Surprisingly, between 12 and 20 million Azerbaijanis, Azeri is their native language, live in Iran. Considerably more than the 8 million who live in Azerbaijan, Iran's neighbor to the north. It is difficult to know the exact number of Azeri speakers, since the government of Iran doesn't release such figures.
What did Genghis Khan conquer?
Genghis Khan, the ruler of the Mongol Empire, conquered an area stretching from China to western Russia to the Middle East. Khan created the world's largest empire, which began to dissolve following his death in 1227.
How many McDonald's restaurants are there in the world?
To some people McDonald's represents the extreme example of cultural imperialism. An import of one's culture supplanted into another. Today, there are 31,000 McDonald's restaurants located in 119 countries.
What is a theocracy?
A theocracy is a country ruled by religion. Iran has the world's largest theocracy. Ruled by people who are national leaders as well as religious leaders. While there is a secular president, the division of power between mullahs. A Muslim trained in religious law, and the president is poorly defined.
How have satellites changed map making?
Satellite images, which are accurate photographs of the Earth's surface, allow cartographers to precisely determine the location of roads, cities, rivers, and other features on the Earth. These images help cartographers create maps that are more accurate than ever before. Since the Earth is a dynamic and ever-changing place, satellite images are great tools that allow cartographers to stay up to date.
When did people start eating with forks and spoons?
Though introduced in the 15th century, forks and spoons did not come into common use in Europe until the 17th century. Prior to that time, people ate with their hands and a knife.
How can I learn more about disasters in my town?
Each community should have its own disaster plan that includes a history of past disasters. Those that have happened in the past are likely to occur in the future, along with plans for dealing with future disasters. You should be able to consult this plan to learn how your community would cope with disaster and to find out the locations of evacuation routes and shelters. Many communities place important disaster planning information in the telephone book for easy reference.
What is the difference between climate and weather?
Climate is the long-term, usually 30-year, average weather for a particular place. The weather is the current condition of the atmosphere. So, the weather in Barrow, Alaska, might be a hot 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But its tundra climate is generally polar-like and cold.
How many people died as a result of the subsequent failure of the levees and flooding after Hurricane Katrina struck?
Approximately 1,460 people lost their lives following the landfall of Hurricane Katrina.
Why are there so many discrepancies in the world records of weather?
The discrepancies in the data reflect the length of time that we use to measure weather phenomena. Some records were set by observing the weather over decades. Others only occurred during the span of a few years or months, or even hours or minutes.
When were time zones established in the United States?
In 1878, Sir Sanford Fleming proposed dividing the world into 24 time zones, each spaced 15 degrees of longitude apart. The contiguous United States was covered by 4 time zones. By 1895, most states had begun to institute the standard time zones of Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific on their own. But it wasn't until 1918 that Congress passed the Standard Time Act, establishing official time zones in the United States.
What is the Ring of Fire?
If you were to look at a map of the world's major earthquakes and volcanoes, you would notice a pattern circling the Pacific Ocean. This dense accumulation of earthquakes and volcanoes is known as the Ring of Fire. The ring is due to plate tectonics and the merger of the Pacific Plate with other surrounding plates, which creates faults and seismic activity, especially Alaska, Japan, Oceania, and the west coasts of North and South America, along with volcanic mountain ranges such as the Cascades of the U.S. Pacific Northwest and the Andes of South America.
What causes earthquakes?
The tectonic plates of the Earth are always in motion. Plates that lie side by side may not move very easily with respect to one another. They stick together and occasionally they slip. These slips, from a few inches to many feet, create earthquakes and can often be very destructive to human lives and structures.
What do medical geographers do?
Medical geographers and epidemiologists, scientists who study disease and health, regularly use maps and spatial information to help control illness and death. Mapping has solved the mystery behind high levels of cancer in small areas and has been used to understand the spread of AIDS. Medical geographers don't just study the distribution of disease. They also investigate the accessibility of people to health services.
How widespread was the influenza pandemic of 1918?
In 1918, a deadly flu spread quickly around the world. Within just 2 years, this influenza pandemic had sickened over 1 billion people and killed more than 21 million. 500,000 people died in the United States alone.
Where was East Pakistan?
When the British left South Asia, they divided the region into India and Pakistan. Muslim regions in Pakistan were located to the east and west of Hindu India. These two separate territories became East and West Pakistan, and were separated by approximately 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers. Having been extremely geographically separated from West Pakistan for over 3 decades, East Pakistan declared independence and became Bangladesh in 1971.
What does a canal lock do?
Many canals connect two bodies of water that lie at different elevations. Locks are used to gradually move the ships from one elevation to another. Once a ship enters a lock, doors close in front of and behind it. Water is then added or drained from the area to raise or lower the ship to a different elevation. Then the doors in front of the ship open and the ship sails down the canal to the next lock or to the open sea.
What is Zoroastrianism?
Zoroastrianism is a religion that began in present-day Iran about 1000 BCE. It is based upon the teachings of the prophet Zoroaster and is an ancient religion that some believe may have influenced the later religions of Christianity and Islam.
Why are some borders curvy while others are straight?
There are two primary types of boundaries: geometric and natural. Geometric boundaries are straight and follow lines of latitude, longitude, or a certain compass direction between points. Geometric boundaries were established to divide territories before settlers entered areas. Most of the states in the western United States have at least a portion of their borders formed by geometric boundaries. Especially rectangular-shaped Colorado and Wyoming. Natural boundaries are usually curvy because they follow the crests of mountains or the center of rivers. Natural boundaries are very common in places like Europe, where the region was populated before the countries were created.
What commodity makes the Persian Gulf so strategically important?
The Persian Gulf is strategically very important because a large share of the world's petroleum is transported through it in oil tankers. At the southeastern end of the Gulf is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow choke point that can be, and has been, controlled to prevent ships from sailing in or out of the Gulf.
Why was the Erie Canal built?
The 363-mile, 584-kilometer, Erie Canal connects the Hudson River to Lake Erie. Opened in 1825, the canal created a new, shorter route from the northern interior of the United States to the Atlantic Ocean. Prior to the opening of the Erie Canal, goods traveled down the Mississippi River and out to the Atlantic. Since New York City lies on the Hudson River, the canal was responsible for the growth of the city as a major port, helping it to become the largest city in the United States. Once the St. Lawrence Seaway was built in 1959, the Erie Canal became rarely used, since most transportation soon traveled along the seaway.
What factors affect population growth?
Many factors affect the growth in population, including an increase in marital age, increasing education level, increased acceptance of the use of contraceptives in much of the world, wars and military action, and genocide.
What happened to the Arawaks after Christopher Columbus arrived in the New World?
It is said that when Columbus arrived on the shores of the islands of the Caribbean, there were between 250,000 and 1,000,000 island Arawaks. By the middle of the 16th century, disease, slavery, and outright killing brought the number down to fewer than 500. Today, about 30,000 Arawaks live in Guyana, and there are small populations in French Guiana and Suriname.
What is the official neckwear of Arizona?
Like an official flower or animal, each state can add additional official symbols for their state. The official neckwear of Arizona is the bolo tie.
How do maquiladoras help clothe the United States?
Maquiladoras are Mexican factories owned by foreign, usually U.S. corporations, most often located along the Mexican U.S. border. Maquiladoras receive raw materials from the United States and produce finished goods for export. Maquiladoras commonly produce clothing and automobiles.
Which state has the most lakes?
Though Minnesota is known for its 10,000 lakes. The slogan on its license plates, "It is not the state with the most lakes." Neighboring Wisconsin has even more, about 14,000 lakes. But Alaska is the definite winner, with over 3 million lakes.
How many times does lightning strike the Earth each year?
About 20 million bolts of lightning are generated in the atmosphere every year.
Why do mosques have domes?
The onion-shaped domes of Islamic mosques and other religious buildings of Eastern religions were an architectural style borrowed from the Byzantine Empire. One of the world's most famous onion-domed buildings, St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow's Red Square, was built in the mid-16th century.
What was the French community?
Only a viable association during the 1950s and 1960s, the French Community. Also known as Communauté Française, was an organization tying together the former French colonies with France.
How did the Guano Island Act help fertilize America?
In 1856, the United States Congress passed the Guano Island Act, which allowed the United States to take possession of any unclaimed island that contained guano. Guano, the excrement of seabirds, was mined for use as fertilizer before the widespread use of chemical fertilizers. Beginning in 1857, the Baker and Howland Islands, located southwest of Hawaii, were mined by the United States until their guano was depleted in 1891.
When was the most territory added to the United States at one time?
In 1803, the United States purchased over 800,000 square miles, 2 million square kilometers, of land from France for $15 million. This territory, known as the Louisiana Purchase, extended from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains and doubled the size of the United States.
When did the United States control the Philippines?
The Philippines were a Spanish colony until 1898, when the United States took control of the more than 700 islands at the close of the Spanish-American War. The islands remained under American control through 1946, except for a 2-year period of Japanese control during World War II. The Philippines became independent in 1946 and leased land to the United States for military bases until 1992. When the U.S. military presence in the Philippines ended,
What is the largest landlocked country in the world?
Kazakhstan, which is the 9th largest country in the world, has no outlet to the ocean. It is over 1 million square miles, 2.59 million square kilometers, in area. While Kazakhstan is located adjacent to the Caspian Sea is a landlocked sea.
Is the ozone layer being depleted?
Scientists have recognized that a hole has developed in the ozone layer. A hole that has been growing since 1979. The hole is located over Antarctica and has been responsible for increased ultraviolet radiation levels in Antarctica, Australia, and New Zealand. As the ozone hole grows, it will increase the amount of harmful ultraviolet light reaching the Earth, causing cancer and eye damage, and killing crops and microorganisms in the ocean.
Which is larger, clay or sand?
A single grain of sand is 1,500 times larger than a grain of clay.
How has GIS revolutionized cartography?
Geographic Information Systems, GIS, began in the 1960s with the popularity of computers. Though very simplistic in its beginning, new technology and inventions have expanded and enhanced the functions of GIS. GIS has revolutionized cartography by using computers to store, analyze, and retrieve geographic data, thus allowing infinite numbers of comparisons to be made quickly. The program formulates information into various layers, such as the location of utility lines, sewers, property boundaries, and streets. These layers can be placed together in a multitude of combinations to create a plethora of maps, unique and suitable to each individual query. The versatility of GIS makes it indispensable to local governments and public agencies.
Was San Francisco destroyed by earthquake or by fire in 1906?
In 1906 a very powerful earthquake struck San Francisco, California, which sparked a fire that destroyed much of the city. In an effort to preserve San Francisco's image with residents and would-be visitors, official policy regarding the disaster stated that it was not the earthquake but mostly the fire that destroyed the city. Official books and publications produced after the earthquake referred to both the fire and the earthquake as having caused the damage. In fact, the earthquake did considerable damage to the city and killed hundreds.
What are incidence maps?
Researchers at such institutions as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, use incidence maps, which plot where and how people have been infected or exposed to such potentially harmful viruses as the influenza, the Ebola virus, West Nile virus, and HIV in order to understand the rate of transmission as related to geography. An incidence map may help scientists figure out the origin of a disease and where and how quickly it is spreading. Global incidence maps are of increasing importance in the fight against potentially harmful biological disasters.
What is the Pan American Highway?
Begun in the 1930s, the Pan American Highway is the result of an international effort to create a highway stretching from Fairbanks, Alaska, to Buenos Aires, Argentina. In 1962, a bridge, known as the Bridge of the Americas, was built over the Panama Canal to continue the highway over the canal. A 100-mile, 161-kilometer, stretch of the highway in eastern Panama still remains unfinished.
Which countries lead the world in child poverty?
Child poverty is defined as the number of children from households who earn 50% less than the national median. Given this measurement, the countries with the most child poverty are Mexico, 26.4%, the United States, 22.4%, Italy, 20.5%, and the United Kingdom, 19.8%.